This hearing of the Military Construction, Veterans Affairs, and Related Agencies Subcommittee will come to order. Thank you all for participating in this hearing about Navy and Marine Corps quality of life and installations. This is an update on all of those issues surrounding the Navy and the Marine Corps. We took a different approach this fiscal year, wanting an opportunity to be able to hear from each of the military services as an individual service rather than having all the services present to us in one quality of life hearing. That way we can drill down on each of the services more specifically. Before we begin, as this hearing is fully virtual, we must address a few housekeeping matters. For today's meeting, the chair or staff designated by the chair may mute participants' microphones when they are not under recognition for the purposes of eliminating inadvertent background noise. Members are responsible for muting and unmuting themselves. If I notice that you have not unmuted yourself, I will ask if you would like the staff to unmute you. If you indicate approval by nodding, staff will unmute your microphone. I remind all members and witnesses that the 5-minute clock still applies. If there is a technology issue, we will move to the next member until the issue is resolved and you will retain the balance of your time. You will notice a clock on your screen that will show how much time is remaining. At 1 minute remaining, the clock will turn to yellow. When your time is expired, the clock will turn red and I will begin to recognize the next member. Of course, we always give a little leeway on that. In terms of the speaking order, we will follow the order set forth in the House rules, beginning with the chair and ranking member. Then members present at the time of the hearing is called to order will be recognized in order of seniority, alternating between majority and minority, and finally members not present at the time the hearing is called to order. Finally, House rules require me to remind you that we have set up an email address to which members can send anything they wish to submit in writing at any of our hearings or markups. That email address has been provided in advance to your staff. And so now the subcommittee will come to order. Good morning. Today we welcome the Navy and Marine Corps installation staff and senior enlisted to discuss quality of life issues, as well as give us an update on installations. We have before us today Mr. Todd L. Schaefer, Acting Assistant Secretary of the Navy for Environment, Installations, and Energy. Vice Admiral Ricky Williamson, Deputy Chief of Naval Operations for Fleet Readiness and Logistics. Lieutenant General Charles Sharoti, Deputy Chief of Installations and Logistics for the Marine Corps. Master Chief Russell Smith, Master Chief Petty Officer of the Navy, who is joining us once again after testifying before the subcommittee in FY21. And Sergeant Major Troy Black, Sergeant Major of the Marine Corps, who also joined us in the last subcommittee hearing in FY21. Thank you all for joining us today to testify about some very critical issues. We certainly have a lot to discuss. Today we look forward to engaging with the Navy and Marine Corps on a host of important subjects. However, before we're able to dive into the critical issues impacting our Navy and Marine Corps, it is important that I preface the hearing by highlighting a major overarching obstacle facing the readiness and success of our armed forces, which is the perennial scaling down of MILCON funding. Over the last several years, we have seen a troubling pattern of decreases in military construction funding, a trend that not only impacts the mission readiness of our forces, but also the quality of life of service members and their families. Between FY 2019 and FY 21, the Navy and Marine Corps alone saw a reduction in funding for military construction of nearly $1.2 billion. This constitutes an incredible and frankly unacceptable decrease of roughly 35%. Military construction is not simply the building of military bases and installations. It is providing quality childcare. It is ensuring security for our service members and their families. It is deterring our adversaries. It is expanding and modernizing our shipyards. It is giving those who serve our great country good homes to live in. The very least we should be able to do for our men and women in uniform is to provide them with the peace of mind that comes from knowing their families are safe and taken care of while they are on a deployment. Although we do not yet have the FY22 President's budget request, I'm hopeful that it will reflect a renewed commitment to prioritizing the funding of military construction projects that ensure the success of our military and those families that sacrifice so much for our country. Even without the FY22 budget, this hearing and the answers we'll seek within it will demonstrate how the current fiscal year's funds are being put to use and paint a picture of what is needed for the next fiscal year. For example, this hearing will discuss the $3.6 billion of stolen MILCON funds by the Trump administration for what was a whimsical border wall and what the impacts of the deferred projects have been on our forces. We'll also inquire as to how much funding will be returned from this now canceled wall and if it will be enough to restore the deferred projects. We will look for explanations as to why privatized housing continues to struggle with oversight and quality assurance. and why the Tenant Bill of Rights still has not been fully implemented 2 years after it was passed into law. This hearing will address the ongoing sexual assault crisis facing our services and allow the witnesses to explain the newest approaches to ensuring every member of our military is heard and protected. Additionally, I hope to receive a full report on how the Navy and Marine Corps is working to expand and improve Childhood Development Centers, CDCs, at our many installations. CDCs are integral to mission readiness, and while there has been a surge of support for more CDCs, thankfully, the Navy and Marine Corps still have had issues with capacity and quality. Amongst the other issues we'll look to engage on today are what the Navy and Marine Corps are doing to ensure installation preparedness for climate change, how the services are updating their archaic practices around incorporating women into the force, the status of international troop relocation, and what that means for our installations, as well as the ongoing effort to modernize our shipyard infrastructure. As you can see, we have many important issues to discuss. I believe this hearing is a great opportunity to identify those crucial areas where we can do more to serve those who serve us. And now, I'm pleased to recognize my colleague and friend, Judge Carter, the ranking member, for his opening remarks. Judge?
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and good morning, Mr. Schaefer, Admiral Williamson, General Girotti, Master Chief Smith, Sergeant Major Black. Welcome to our hearing. Thank you for serving our nation and your dedication to our sailors and our Marines. I wish that we were discussing the FY22 budget today, but however, I'm grateful for the opportunity to hear from you the issues and the challenges you face as leaders of the Navy and the Marine Corps. Military construction and family housing are a small part of the Defense Department budget, yet they affect sailors and Marines and their families on a daily basis, and thus they affect readiness. We should do more to make the connection between the two. General Girotti and Sergeant Major Black, the Appropriations Committee staff, asked me to publicly thank you and the Marines at Barracks 8th and I for allowing local kids to use their athletic fields for soccer games. Over the past year, it's been a tough time, especially on our kids. The Marines on 8th and we tried to make it a little better. Madam Chairwoman, thank you for yielding to me, and I yield back.
Thank you so much, Judge Carter. I appreciate each of you taking the time to be here and sharing your perspectives and expertise. Without objection, all written statements will be entered into the record. Due to the number of witnesses today, we will start with Mr. Schaefer and move down the list as such. Vice Admiral Williamson, Lieutenant General Girotti, Master Chief Petty Officer of the Navy Smith, and finally, Sergeant Major Black. Each of you will be recognized for 5 minutes to summarize your opening statement, and your opening statement will be entered into the record. Secretary Schaefer, you're recognized for 5 minutes to summarize your opening statement.
Thank you, Chairwoman Wasserman Schultz. Ranking Member Carter and distinguished members of the committee, thank you for this opportunity to testify before the committee. I have the distinct privilege and pleasure to represent the Department of the Navy's Energy, Installations, and Environment portfolio. Naval installations enhance the quality of life for our military personnel, our federal civil servants, and their families, and enable the lethality and warfighting readiness of our military forces. The 95 Navy and Marine Corps installations across the United States and around the world play a fundamental role in enabling the Secretary of Defense's top 3 priorities. Those are defend the nation, take care of our people, and succeed through teamwork. I look forward to working with the Congress to ensure our installations are prepared and empowered to support the National Defense Strategy. Once again, thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Vice Admiral Williamson, you're recognized for 5 minutes to summarize your opening statement, and your opening statement will be entered into the record.
Thank you, ma'am. Chairwoman Wasserman Schultz, Ranking Member Carter, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. In conjunction with the other members of the panel, I appreciate the opportunity to provide an update on the quality and resilience of Navy installations. On behalf of our sailors and their families, thank you for your continued support of the United States Navy, its military construction program, and our 70 installations around the world, which enable us to strengthen readiness and to support delivery of new and more lethal platforms. Additionally, thank you for your ongoing focus on the Navy's quality of life programs, which are critical to the success of our Navy overall. The military construction program optimizes Navy installations to enable global logistics and warfare development, generation, and employment from the shore. The fiscal year 2021 MILCON appropriations and authorizations included a total of $927 million for 19 projects, funding our planning and design and unspecified minor construction projects. Funding applied to our installation also supports climate resilience, which is an important component of installation mission readiness. The Navy works to ensure installations and infrastructure are resilient to a wide range of challenges, including extreme weather events, water scarcity, sea level rise, recurrent flooding, wildfires, and other environmental considerations and threats. The Navy's mission assurance assessment process is an all-hazard threat assessment that reviews both the probability and mission impact of climate risk tailored to specific geographic locations to ensure our ongoing success and security. It is a privilege to testify before the committee today. We are committed to being good stewards of the taxpayers' dollars, and we will invest smartly to drive efficiency and ensure the best return on investment for the nation, our sailors, our civilians, and I look forward to answering your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Admiral. General Shiroti, you are recognized for 5 minutes to summarize your opening statement, and your opening statement will be entered into the record.
Chairwoman Wasserman Schultz, Ranking Member Carter, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, I appreciate the opportunity to discuss Marine Corps installations here today. Our installations are critical to our ability to train forces and maintain readiness and taking care of our Marine sailors and their families. Thanks for the strong support. The Marine Corps continues to improve the quality and resiliency of installations and bases. I'd like to start by expressing my gratitude for the support that was provided to rebuild the infrastructure damaged by Hurricane Florence in 2018. The effects of that storm highlighted to me the need to modernize our infrastructure so that it is more resilient to the effects of extreme weather. We sincerely appreciate your rapid support in providing the resources to restore our facilities and installations on the East Coast. Today, the Marine Corps operates installations and support infrastructure worldwide valued at more than $110 billion. And this infrastructure must be properly maintained to prevent degradation of our ability to support our mission. Our installations face a variety of threats, from asymmetric attacks to the effects of climate change and extreme weather, so we must invest in their resilience. The Marine Corps has undertaken several initiatives to maintain reliable access to critical functions, such as effective power grid, clean water distribution, and communications capabilities, so the Marine Corps is always ready to meet its Title X responsibilities. To meet the current evolving threats from our peer adversaries, the Marine Corps is currently undergoing a significant transformation in how it is organized, trained, and equipped. To meet the Commandant's force design priorities, the Marine Corps' installations infrastructure must also evolve. Although the requirements of the future force are not yet fully determined, the rise of peer and near-peer threats will require several of our bases and stations to persist within the range of enemy weapon systems. This presents unique challenges for installations resilience. I look forward to working with this subcommittee to meeting those requirements as they come into greater focus. Thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today and your oversight, input, and support. I look forward to working with you to sustain our warfighting capabilities and the readiness of our power projection platforms. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, General Shiroti. Master Chief Petty Officer Smith, you are recognized for 5 minutes to summarize your opening statement, and your opening statement will be entered into the record.
Chairwoman Wasserman Schultz, Ranking Member Carter, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, I'm honored to appear before you today on behalf of the men and women who serve in our Navy. The Navy has weathered many challenges since our last opportunity to testify, as our nation has, but we remain strong, committed to the defense of our shores and our interests abroad, committed to our citizens, and committed to our shipmates and teammates. I'm always grateful for the opportunity to discuss the significant challenges we face, and in the coming year, these challenges will directly affect and impact the service and quality of life of our sailors and our greater Navy family. The Navy I joined in 1988 had nearly twice as many sailors as we have today, and at the height of the Reagan buildup, we had more than double the amount of ships we have now. With roughly half of what we once had 33 years ago, and despite an increasingly complex and far less predictable maritime security environment, we continue to maintain the same operational tempo of about 92 ships deployed away from port on any given day. This puts a strain on our force that is greater than has ever existed in our history. Even with the increased ability to connect, seen by some as a comfort or means to extend resilience, can just as easily be seen as an operational hindrance. Once focused sailors at sea are now dealing with problems on the home front in real time, not just at mail call or when it was operationally safer or more convenient. Recruiting, training, and deploying combat-ready Navy forces set against the pandemic and the unique close quarters operating environment of units at sea in crew aircraft has not been easy. And yet our Navy continues to meet recruiting goals, train accession sailors, and man the fleet, preparing and deploying our forces in support of COCOM requirements. The toughness of our sailors was best evidenced in the Nimitz Strike Group's 341-day deployment to CENTCOM extended 6 times unexpectedly through Thanksgiving and Christmas in support of national tasking. Similarly, the USS Stout recorded 215 straight days at sea. These Herculean efforts show not what we want our sailors to have to endure, but what they are absolutely capable of when called upon by the nation. I'm here today to advocate for the continued support that will keep our sailors navigating these waters boldly and safely. Sufficient mental health resources and childcare facilities remain the perennial challenges we face. In addition, our Navy families also face concerns such as job security, timely access to medical resources, and the ability to find adequate housing, just as many other American families do. Congress has made great headway in creating the kind of flexibility we need to retain the Navy family, which has been a key enabler in retaining our best talent, expertise, experience, and passion within our lifelines. Our Navy remains committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion. As our Chief of Naval Operations speaks about so often and so eloquently, we must remain committed in our efforts to improve the opportunities for all who come to us to serve. We must continue to embrace our diversity. Who we are contributes to our diversity of thought and ability to work through complex challenges in combat, and is one of the greatest reasons we will prevail. Diverse teams find the most creative and efficient solutions under the greatest conditions of stress, something that has been proven over and over throughout our history. We not only owe it to those who swear an oath to serve our nation, but we owe our nation the best possible defense by maximizing our greatest strength, our people. All these efforts in the end are to ensure that we are a Navy that is combat ready and the Navy the nation needs. Throughout the pandemic, our sailors have pushed on, deploying forward around the world to ensure the sea lanes and skies remain free and open to all wherever international law allows. As our adversaries continue to push the boundaries of professional conduct with aggressive maneuvers in the South China Sea, the Black Sea, and the Arabian Gulf and elsewhere, we've maintained our strong posture. Your support helps our Navy increase dominance and survivability at sea as we continue to deter aggression in the most contested waters. Recruiting, training, educating our sailors is critical to our ability to prosecute any enemy we face, to challenge adversaries who dare to threaten our national security. I'm truly appreciative of your efforts, the real detailed work unseen by many in our nation that has been in steadfast support of our Navy and our families. You've enabled us to remain ready to defend the nation, and we will continue to work diligently with the precious resources you entrust to us. It's been an honor and privilege to serve, and I know our sailors are appreciative of your careful stewardship. Thank you for your time, ma'am, and I'm looking forward to your questions.
Thank you, Master Chief. And now finally, Sergeant Major Black, you're recognized for 5 minutes to summarize your opening statement, and your opening statement will be entered into the record.
Madam Chairwoman Wasserman Schultz, Ranking Member Carter, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for giving me the opportunity to report to you on your Marines and the state of our military personnel and family readiness. Last year, the uncertainty of the COVID-19 pandemic impacted us all, and the Marine Corps had to and continues to adjust and adapt to maintain its readiness, recruiting and sessions, training, and in both support of our defense of our nation. Abroad, we have over 17,500 Marines, forward station and 16,000 Marines forward deployed in 50 countries around the globe in support of defense of our nation. At home, Marines continue to participate in the whole of nation COVID-19 response efforts. Last year, Marines and sailors supported East and West Coast hospital facilities by embarking on Navy hospital ship Comfort in New York and Mercy in San Diego to provide relief to citizens and communities hardest hit by COVID-19 pandemic. Even more recently, I personally visited community vaccination centers in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and Dallas, Texas, where our Navy and Marine Corps team have assisted in the delivery of hundreds of thousands of COVID-19 vaccines to area residents. In addition, mitigation and response priorities, the 5 priorities stated by the Commandant in his planning guidance have not yet changed, nor are anticipated to. They are force design, war fighting, education and training, core values, and command and leadership. Each of these key areas affect our Marines, sailors, and their families. As the Commandant stated in his Commandant's planning guidance, the Marine Corps must accept an environment characterized by uncertainty, but cannot ignore the strong signals of change, nor be complacent when it comes to designing and preparing for the force of the future. To this end, the Commandant has established a Council on Diversity and Inclusion that is comprised of enlisted, officer, and civilian board members. Currently, all military occupational specialties are open to any male or female Marine that can meet the standard. Gender integrated training is being conducted at both Marine Corps recruit depots at Parris Island, and I'm happy to advise this committee that as of last Thursday, the first female Marines in history graduated from Marine Corps Recruit Depot, San Diego. Changes in the Uniform Code of Military Justice and implementation of prohibited activities orders have given commanders tools to maintain, instill, and increase good order and discipline within their ranks. As we have traveled, Commandant and I have seen firsthand the efforts of Marines and their leadership to provide appropriate resources and address the needs of our Marines, sailors, and their families. We provide ourselves on knowing Marines and sailors, looking out for their welfare, and that means being engaged, present, and involved. Simply, we must inspect what we expect. This supervision includes Marine and Family programs, Marine Corps Community Services, Child Development Centers, transition assistance programs, barracks conditions, and the homes of our Marines, sailors, and their families. At every location, there are teams of dedicated civilians working hard to inspect, and meet the needs of our Corps for the Marines, families, and their sailors. With respect to the public-private house venture or PPV housing, I believe the inclusion of the language in NDAA that outlines a tenant bill of rights is the right thing to do and a great tool for improving the quality of service and user confidence. Being a Marine is challenging. Serving in forward areas has inherent dangers and training has risks. Those risks are calculated and understood. They are in some ways acceptable, but what is not acceptable and is the preventable deaths during training that we have recently incurred. Although deaths by suicide will still occur in the Marine Corps, we must continue to join the nation's struggle to understand and address this difficult subject. Reports on hazing show that we still have strides to make in this area. And similarly, the reduction of sexual assault and sexual harassment remains a challenge within our Corps and our military academies. We can and must do better. Marines train to fight and win. This means tough, realistic training with the resources to do it. Your Marines are the best in the world. Your Marine Corps is committed to our nation's cause, and the Commandant's planning guidance states we are defined by our collective character as Marines and by fulfilling our service roles and functions prescribed by this Congress. Marines first, mission always. This is my guiding principle. That includes our families who are among our unsung strength of our Corps. I thank this committee for its continued post, present, and future continued support. I look forward to your questions. Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all of you for your really impeccable service to our nation. We'll now begin questioning under our normal rules. We'll proceed in the standard 5-minute rounds, alternating sides, recognizing members in order of seniority as they were seated at the beginning of the hearing. I'll begin with my questions. I want to specifically start my focus on the deferred and canceled military construction projects. As you're aware, the Trump administration diverted $3.6 billion of funding for MILCON projects for the border wall under 2808 authority, including 18 Navy and Marine Corps projects. The Biden administration ended this policy and recently announced that all unobligated amounts remaining from that $3.6 billion will soon be returned back to their original intended purpose of supporting investments in military construction. I understand that of the $3.6 billion in MILCON funds that were stolen by the Trump administration for the border wall, some of that funding has already been spent on barrier construction at the border. How will the Navy and Marine Corps balance competing needs to restore funding for the projects with so much of that gone? And how will the return of the funds be handled? And how much total funding for Navy and Marine Corps projects specifically do you expect to recoup from those unobligated funds?
Madam Chairwoman, Todd Schaefer,
Yes.
EI&E. Ma'am, right now, the Deputy Secretary of Defense has asked the acting Undersecretary of Defense Comptroller to prepare a plan to immediately return all those unobligated funds to the military departments. USD Comptroller expects to provide briefings on those in the very near future. On the Department of the Navy side, we've been working in concert with the Office of the Secretary of Defense staff to put together the plans on which projects will have enough funding to continue, and if there are projects that will not have funding, on how we're going to address those going forward.
Can you give me a more specific answer? I know we discussed this briefly the other day. Do you expect to recoup most of the unobligated funds? What is the current plan for the projects that were canceled by the movement of that funding in terms of restoring the projects? How much of those projects do you expect to be able to restore?
Ma'am, our expectation in planning discussions with the Office of the Secretary of Defense, Comptroller, and others is that looks like we'll get a return of the majority of those funds. Again, the plan has not been approved by the Deputy Secretary of Defense yet, but it's looking that way, ma'am.
Okay, well, that's an optimistic tone, and I would ask that you keep us posted on that. I want to shift over to the issue of privatized housing. The Department of the Navy has been working with the Office of the Secretary of Defense and other services to improve the quality of family housing and quality of life for sailors, Marines, and their families. That's been a major focus of our subcommittee. We've held hearings on it the last several years. The FY20 national, the NDAA enacted 34 provisions to overhaul and protect the families that have been wrongly treated by the private companies. I'd like an update, particularly on the status of implementing the 3 remaining rights within the Tenant Bill of Rights, and also really to get an answer from you on a common failing across the services that have been indifferent or non-existent in the command involvement in housing management at the OSD and installation level. Secretary Schaefer, what is the Navy doing to ensure installation commanders are informed, empowered to act, and motivated to intervene on behalf of military families? Because that's been a rampant problem. If you can answer the Tenant Bill of Rights question and that for me as well, I'd appreciate it.
Yes, ma'am. Certainly, taking care of our sailors and Marines is a top priority for the Department of Navy leadership, and down to each of our service chiefs, and all the way down to the installation commander level. We have increased the number of housing officers at the base level to improve relationships between our private public venture companies and our members. Installation commanders are now involved in all things that go on in response to disputes that happen. So certainly we're seeing sustained leadership support in this area. On the Tenant Bill of Rights, there were 14 of them. We've got 10 of them 10 of them have been executed, or we have agreements with our partners already to implement those. The remaining 4 will be implemented by 1 June. We are already seeing that the standard lease is been approved. We're now working through state agreements by state, because there has to be an addendum because of the different laws and regulations in each state. But we're making very good progress with that, and we're expecting completion of all the Bill of Rights by 1 June, ma'am.
Applicable retroactively on the existing agreements, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, that's very good to hear. The only other piece of that question that I wanted to ask you is, we've appropriated additional funding for family housing, particularly at the oversight level, How has the Navy used those increases in family housing appropriations?
Yes, ma'am. And I believe you're referring to the additional people that we've added across the Department of the Navy. Those were the housing folks that I mentioned earlier that are now down at the base level, the installation level, doing that engagement between the member in the privatized housing, working with the privatized company, and then working with the base leadership to make sure that we're resolving the members' issues.
Okay.
Ma'am, if I could, from the Marine Corps, if I could jump in, if that's okay.
Yes, of course.
So from the Marine Corps perspective, this year we hired 114 additional installation privatized housing partners personnel. Just like Mr. Schaefer said, they are the interface between the tenant and the partner. Their role is to be the quality assurance for the command installation, to ensure that we have a baseline for when the tenant receives the house, to when there's a complaint, to when they check out of the house, and they're able to be the government's voice, the command's voice on any disputes that may come up or any differences in that baseline. This has proven to be extremely effective, as we've been able to have direct oversight of the conditions of the homes when they come into when a family takes over a home. I've seen this firsthand at Lejeune. It's very successful, and it's because of the support that we received through the NDA language and the plus up that we were able to do this. There's also been a directive from the Commandant, first from General Neller, now from General Berger, that the command teams, the individual unit command teams, are required to have direct oversight of these issues, and they are involved at the command level as well as the installation levels. And we routinely are dealing with them at my level as well, too, to ensure that we have the proper oversight and protection of our tenants.
Thank you.
Ma'am, this is Vice Admiral Williams, and if I could also add to that. First of all, I'd like to thank you very much for the plus up. We in the Navy have hired 183 additional people to the same positions as the Marine Corps has. In addition to that, one of the things you talked about or asked about was leadership engagement, particularly at the installation level. We have continued to do the family advocacy group meetings and continued with tenant satisfaction surveys. The results of those surveys are very promising. We've seen the increase in the survey scores at 11 locations, and we averaged a 91.3% average or above, which is significantly better than when we started a year ago, man.
Good. That's great to hear. I'm glad that both the funding and the authorizations have improved things. I know I'm going to want to hear, and I'm sure my colleagues will as well, from the actual beneficiaries of those of that new oversight, the military service members who really have lived in very, very difficult conditions prior to those actions. So we'll look forward to having a hearing on that, and so we can hear directly from them and the impact on them. Judge Carter, you're recognized for 5 minutes, and thank you for your indulgence.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Admiral Williamson, I recognize the Defense Health Agency now manages military hospitals. However, I visited Guantanamo Bay Naval Station early in 2020, saw firsthand the condition of the hospital, which in my opinion is about one significant earthquake away from being completely unusable. What's the status of planning for its replacement, and when do you expect the funding will be necessary to begin construction?
Thank you very much, sir, for the question. I had the great privilege of being the commander of Navy Region Southeast, and I am very familiar with the hospital you're speaking of. Currently, right now, the Navy and DHA are working in plan collaboratively to design and develop a new hospital. Once those plans are finalized, it will go in to the budget, and we'll look at funding as we move forward, sir.
What kind of time schedule do you think you'll be on? What kind of time schedule do you got?
Sorry.
Can you hear me?
Judge, do you know to whom that's directed?
I was asking the Admiral what kind of time schedule they have.
Yes, sir. I'm sorry, sir. I had a hard time hearing you. Right now, we expect to have the plan completed later on this summer. And once that is done, then we will ensure, like we do with all of our projects, you mentioned being in Guantanamo Bay. Obviously it is very prone to hurricanes and severe wind. We'll ensure that all the resiliency part of that is included in this plan as we move forward. We should be with the plan here by the close of the fiscal year over. So,
thank you very much. General, the subcommittee has supported the relocation of Marines to Okinawa, from Okinawa to Guam. We provided $426 million in the FY21 for construction projects related to this effort. What's the status of the relocation? Are construction projects proceeding as planned? Are there any delays? And what can we do to help you?
Sure. Thank you very much for your question. The Defense Program Review Initiative, which is DPRI, is well on track and executing. As you may be aware of, the requirement calls for the first force relocation to be in the first part of 2025. This year, we established, for the first time since the Korean War, we established our first installation, which is Marine Corps Base Camp Blas on Guam. I was just there with the Commandant and the Sergeant Major of the Marine Corps visiting them 3 weeks ago, and we got to see firsthand the impacts of resourcing and how positive that they are. We've seen vertical construction and along on the main camp itself, along with the training ranges that are required to support the force relocation there. We are on track, sir, to meet the requirement that is the bilateral agreement between the United States and the government of Japan to commence the initial movement of forces in the early 2025 timeframe. Thank you very much for your continued support and oversight of that program, sir.
Thank you. Finally, Master Chief and Sergeant Major, I have a question about the suicide prevention. Both the Navy and the Marine Corps are very concerned about their people and suicide, and the whole country's concerned about suicide, and at every level we're looking into it. Well, our job here is military construction. What can we do that would help with, in your opinion, suicide prevention in your two services? Would it be better BEQs, more off-base housing, better gyms, recreation facilities, child care, youth centers? What can we build that helps? That's where we can work. Did you understand me? I've got a bad voice.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Ranking Member Carter. I appreciate the question, sir. To be honest, sailors really want to do their job, and being able to do that first and foremost is a significant contributor to quality of life. We say in the Navy, every sailor is a firefighter and damage controlman, because if your ship sinks from out from underneath you, you got nowhere to go but the water. We have a firefighting demonstrator, not a trainer, because we can't qualify or certify anybody in it at the place where we train every enlisted sailor up at RTC Great Lakes. And we have a project that we're trying to get built that will provide a world-class facility for our sailors so that they can show up to, say, the Bonhomme Richard on a Wednesday and be ready to fight a fire when it starts Sunday morning at 8:05. It's critical that our sailors have basic skills that they can contribute in a fire, because it's all hands on deck when that ship is at sea. And getting that built would be of tremendous help to us, sir.
Well, and I agree, training is number one. Thank you for that. Sergeant Major?
Sir, thank you for the question, and understanding what this committee really is responsible for. I don't want to change the tone of that, but I'd like to explain your question a little bit, or I would like to redefine it a little bit. Your question is about suicide, but I would look at suicide in more than one aspect. Suicide is also mental health. It's also spiritual health. It's also physical health. It's all these things that we talk about. They're really the person, the individual. It's human performance writ large. I think for this committee, it's interesting to understand how when we talk about one of these things, I'll call them in stovepipes, is just a lack of a better term, individually, then we talk about how we help the individual. All of those things are human performance writ large. So if we talk about them separately, it doesn't really help to get after all the other contributing factors that really either lead to a suicide, lead to domestic violence, lead to maybe potentially a sexual assault, alcoholism. They're all one thing. It's all the things that involve the self, sir. So I would always answer those kinds of questions with talking about all of those aspects and not just the one. We are concerned, however, about the suicide rates. I think the Master Chief Petty Officer in the Navy and I have both said separately and sometimes together, that still remains really our top priorities. That loss of life, sir, is not acceptable. Counselors, the facilities to counsel in, those would be of great assistance, sir.
Well, thank you. And this committee and the Defense Committee have been concerned about suicide for years. I mean, really long time. And thank you for what you're trying to do at every level. I yield back.
Thank you so much, Judge Carter. And let me just follow up on what Judge Carter's line of questioning was, in the sense that we are responsible for the quality of life issues for members of our military, and certainly suicide prevention would, and making sure that we don't lose members of the military to suicide is a quality of life issue, because if you commit suicide, you no longer have your life. Not very good quality. Thank you. Mr. Bishop, you're recognized for 5 minutes for your questions.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And let me thank our witnesses for being with us today. Thank you so very much for your service and for all you do to promote the welfare and the well-being of the men and women in uniform and their families. I want to ask 2 questions. The first will go to the enlisted personnel, Sergeant Major Black and Master Chief Petty Officer Smith, with regard to our military families and our military personnel. I co-chair the Congressional Military Family Caucus, and there are a number of issues that we deal with on a regular basis in conjunction with a lot of the other support organizations like Blue Star Families that conducts a survey. And there are a number of issues that impact our military families, including the housing, which has been referred to earlier, spousal employment issues, child care issues, and particularly exceptional family member program issues. And of course, with regard to our personnel, you got the sexual assault issue. And most recently, we've heard reports of food insecurity among some of the lower non-commissioned officers within the branches of the service. So I'd like for you to sort of discuss what efforts and what agencies within your respective services are working to address these programs for the 2 gentlemen that do such a great job representing our families and our military personnel. And secondly, for the Deputy Chief of Installations and the Naval Operations Fleet, the officers, I want you to address the whole climate change issue with respect to our energy security and how that is impacting and how it's being dealt with by your respective services. And I'd be interested for a little more detailed discussion of the net zero program as it has been applied at the Marine Corps Logistics Base in Albany. If you could split your time.
Sir, I think I'd like to, of all the, it's Master Chief Smith, sir, of all the things that you mentioned, when it comes to Navy families, I think childcare, frankly, is the one I'd like to focus on, given the amount of time we have to speak. Childcare is the one issue I get everywhere I go. I get a lot of issues, lots of places I go, but the one thing I get everywhere is childcare. And as the chairwoman pointed out in the beginning, the drop in MILCON funding and the ability to solve this problem with MILCON is really, it's not something we can count on. We're building out about 1,000 spaces between improvements to a center in Kitsap County, Washington State, and a few other places, but building real places and facilities to solve that problem isn't something we can do. So we're focusing more on public-private partnerships with businesses, ecumenical institutions, places that have infrastructure where we can roll in with workforce and share facilities to provide childcare. We've got one that's been, actually 2 in San Diego that have been very successful so far. We've got a couple under development in Norfolk. And that looks to be, if we can exploit that, a really good way to team up with the community to find solutions to solve for real numbers.
Thank you.
And sir, sorry, sir, I walked over top of you. My apologies. Sir, if I could just follow up with the Master Chief Petty Officer of the Navy with CDC. One, thank you to the committee. We've been able to find a means to build a couple of new CDC projects or fund a couple of new CDC projects. That's being able to help take and relieve some of the stress we have on our families who need child care. I also want to thank the committee for assistance with the fee assistance program. That's where we assist families in being able to pay for child care off the installations when there's not a capacity on the installation. Huge benefit for those families that it applies to. So if I could just go to one other topic outside of the one that we just talked about, and that's spouse employment. I think we continue to make strides in how we support our spouses being able to be employed for the Marine Corps. And I don't think this is a secret to anyone. We're a transient organization. Marines move from location to location. And it's that transition period that really makes it the largest challenge for our spouses to find employment. Thank you again to the committee for the incentives that we've been able to provide to those families that help them with paying for recredentialing, retraining, and other educational opportunities that allow them to get to that new workforce and be able to compete a lot better in that workforce. We appreciate that as well. Thank you, sir.
I think my time has expired, so I'll have to come back for the climate change and net zero discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Bishop. The gentleman yields back. Mr. Valadeo, you're recognized for 5 minutes for your questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks to our guests today for your time today. I know it's been touched on a lot, and I just want to reiterate what Judge Carter and Chairwoman had mentioned on the suicide issue, and I think it does go to quality of life, and obviously a lot of the resources there at our bases for our from, in my case, sailors, because Naval Air Station Lemoore is in my district. There's been a lot of work done by some of the folks who have been in charge of that base to try to make quality of life a little bit better and more comfortable, and hopefully that helps. But I do want to touch on drought. Drought is a major issue, obviously, in California. Earlier this week, California Governor Gavin Newsom, with urging from myself and my colleagues in the state delegation, declared additional counties in California under drought state of emergency. This includes my entire district, which is home to NAS Lemoore. The vast majority of California is seeing extreme drought conditions, creating significant problems for not only our residents, but the agriculture community and the military community in my district. What steps are being taken to ensure base resiliency in the wake of this critical water storage shortage? Mr. Schaefer, sorry, or Vice Admiral Williamson.
Sir, Todd Schaefer from EI&E, and I'll team with Vice Admiral Williamson. But from an overarching policy perspective, climate resiliency is built into all the things that we do. And we're looking to not only make sure that we've got water resiliency, energy resiliency, cyber resiliency. We have to account for all those things. And as we've seen from direction from the Secretary of Defense, we're going to build that into all of our war plans. We're building that into all of our construction plans. We're building that into all of our restoration and modernizations, our new constructions, and everything that we do. So certainly from a policy perspective, the Department of the Navy recognizes that and is making sure that we're doing that in our installations. And I'll turn it over to Vice Admiral Williamson for further detail.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much for your question. I had the great privilege of being the commanding officer of Naval Base San Diego, and so I'm very familiar with the water challenges in that particular area. But as Mr. Schaefer said, part of our installation master plans are written and developed specific for geographic areas. The bases in the Southwest region incorporate water scarcity as part of their overarching plans. The Navy takes action within our lifelines to get after those things by monitoring our systems, our water consumption. Part of those plans, something that seems as benign as putting native plants that can thrive in those environments instead of things that are required to be watered every day. As far as the resilience of the base, obviously the fires and stuff, I happen to be in Southern California for a couple of these events. The other part of it is the quality of the air. We talked about the health and safety of our communities, the sailors and their families. We actually, in our master plans, accommodate for that as well. And we continue to work very collaboratively with the local governments and state to ensure that we're within all standards and we use and taking advantage of the most recent technologies. I'll give you an example of that where sprinkler systems running in a rain shower, being able to put in a system that keeps the vegetation growing, but only responds when needed instead of on a timer every single day. So I very much appreciate the question and very much appreciate your support for Lemoore. Thank you, sir.
I appreciate it. And I've got one quick question. January 2020, a new policy went into effect allowing disabled veterans with a Veterans Health Identification Card to access military installations. However, in the 17 months since going into effect, the base access policy has been applied inconsistently across the country with much confusion and burdensome paperwork thrown at our disabled veterans. For example, at NAS Lemoore, VHIC holders can go to on base, but to bring their spouse or child with them to the commissary or NEX, they must fill out a background check form and Pass ID every time the guest accompanies them. To add to the inconvenience, the Pass ID office is closed on weekends, so veterans must bring their family member on Friday to get a weekend pass, a significant burden when many spouses are working during the week. Is the Navy working with installation commanders to standardize the base access policy for disabled veterans and their families? And I know my time is up, so quick, hopefully yes on that would be great. If not, hopefully really soon. And this is towards Vice Admiral Williamson or Master Chief Smith.
So this is Vice Admiral Williamson. I am not familiar with that situation. However, the way you described it, it absolutely requires some attention. I would be happy to take that for the record and get back to you very shortly.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. And thank you, Chairwoman, for indulging my extra time. And I yield back.
You're welcome. The gentleman yields back. And now, Mr. Case, you're recognized for 5 minutes for your questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Master Chief Smith, I'd like to talk with you about sexual harassment and sexual assault, which has continued to be a persistent issue throughout our military despite good faith efforts, I'm sure, across the military. It is the subject of proposed legislation in Congress to mandate a different system to address sexual assault and sexual harassment. Personally, I would prefer that the right approach be adopted by our military rather than being mandated by legislative enactment. But I'm sure that if we can't get it right, that's where it's going to go. So you made reference in your testimony to this issue appropriately. You talked about it being a team effort among your commandant and leadership throughout the military to prevent it and to address it when it is claimed and when it happens. You made reference to the Independent Review Commission that has now recommended, as I understand it, that in the area of claimed sexual assault, the claim itself, the allegation, the charge, be turned over to an independent judge advocate and taken away from the commanding officer himself or herself. And I'm asking you a direct question, which is how do you feel that the enlisted ranks, your constituency, feel? How would they react? How are they reacting to that recommendation? Is that the right approach from their perspective? What are the subtleties of the discussion within the ranks?
Sir, I appreciate the opportunity to answer that question. To be honest, that recommendation is brand new, and I haven't had a chance, as much as I travel in the last couple of days, I haven't had a chance to pulse out a reaction. I can tell you, proactively discussing this, I think there is an understanding that having a committee that's outside the immediate chain of command deal with some of these issues is a good idea. I don't want to get ahead of my Chief of Naval Operations, but we've discussed this as well. And in my own opinion, I do feel like this is probably a good step. It's a positive step. I know the chairman recently made a statement on it, and others did have as well. And I think that that's a very positive step forward in finding real justice.
Thank you. Sergeant Major, do you have a view on this?
Sir, Commandant and I have spoken on this personally, and we both agree, sir, that there's probably applicability in looking at a different way to handle these cases. There are cautions, and I'll offer my personal opinion on that, because it's not personal, but just my observations. If a judge advocate adjudicates a case or doesn't adjudicate a case, it turns that case back over to a commanding officer for some other action, it's very difficult then for that commander to do anything. What's less than a court-martial when there's not enough evidence for a court-martial, for instance? The commander's tools at that point in time for non-judicial punishment or other means, meaning it did not meet the criteria for adjudication at a court-martial, something may have occurred. The commander has two options: administratively or through non-judicial punishment. Well, rights of the accused state that a Marine can refuse non-judicial punishment and request a court-martial. That process has already been done. So there's some things that need to be worked out just procedurally and in practicality to make sure that we can smooth out those challenges. Because at the end of the day, so it doesn't matter what method that we use to get to holding people accountable. We have to find the means to hold people accountable that's justified for the victim. And I think that's the course we need to look at in totality and make sure we get everything figured out whatever we end up with, sir.
What, from your perspective, what would be the pros of turning it over to the, what problem would it solve if the charging authority was removed from the commanding officer? I mean, what does that accomplish in your view?
In my view,
Right.
More focused on one thing. Commanders are obviously very busy. They got many things to focus on. However, what will not be addressed in that is speeding up the investigatory process, which is still one of the biggest complaints from victims. Not that someone was eventually held accountable, but how long it took to figure that out. Law right now constrains who can actually investigate sexual assault, sexual harassment. That's a very small number of specific investigators who have also other things to do. So whatever body does it, one of the largest complaints is still not being addressed. And that's how long it takes to actually get the investigations complete, sir.
Sir,
Thank you.
if I might add just one point to accentuate what the Sergeant Major said, it has to be resourced properly if it's going to be done.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Case. I appreciate your line of questioning. It's a very important issue. Gentleman yields back. And now I believe Mr. Rutherford has returned, and you're recognized for your 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I might, Vice Admiral Williamson, I'd like to begin with you since you're from Jacksonville. If I could, what I'd like to ask about is the Fleet Readiness Center infrastructure and the optimization plans that we have, I know you're very familiar with those facilities and the infrastructure there. I'm really concerned about the priority of the infrastructure there at Fleet Readiness Southeast. And can you talk a little bit about the depot itself, number one, but then also I'd like to ask about specifically, and I don't know if you can speak to this, but the dry dock situation and the assistance that we may be able to get through BAE there in Jacksonville, when they're looking at the LCS, lethality and survivability upgrades that they're talking about, if they could do that work in Jacksonville, the crews would be able to stay in Jacksonville with their families. That'd be a tremendous benefit. And I think BAE has a great plan there in Jacksonville. And I'm just curious how all of that looks, particularly given the challenge that the Navy's facing with dry dock capacity.
Sir, first of all, thank you very much, and I'm very proud to be from Jacksonville. I am very familiar with the Fleet Readiness Centers there in the Southeast. And as the CNO put in his NAV plan, our Fleet Readiness Centers, they're a national asset, and they directly contribute to our Navy's readiness, and they're overdue for some upgrades. So right now, kind of tying two things together here, our shipyard infrastructure optimization plan, the FRCs are actually going through pretty much the same mechanics, and that is developing FRC infrastructure optimization plans. Not only does that get at the infrastructure of the facility itself, but it also looks at the flow of work in the facility and also the machinery in which the artisans do their jobs. And so right now what that's going to do is result into a master plan for each one of the FRCs to include the one in Jacksonville. We expect that to be completed by the end of fiscal year 23. And what that will do is set out a very informed roadmap for us to invest. The BAE and the private shipyard that you brought up, I can talk very eloquently about the PSYOP, but as far as the challenges go there, sir, let me take that for the record. Let me go back and coordinate with Vice Admiral Bill Galinas, and I will get on your calendar to discuss that with you.
Thank you, Admiral. And if we could talk also about the St. John's Marine Group and the work that the contracts that they have with the Navy, I'd like to talk to you about that as well. Let me jump over to General Sharani. As you know, Jacksonville has the Marine Corps Support Facility, Blunt Island Command. We have an issue there, and actually this is something I think Assistant Secretary Schaefer may want to weigh in on as well, and that is we have some tremendous challenges on the island itself from an environmental standpoint. I recently visited Blunt Island and saw their need for some shoreline repair projects. However, I understand there's an issue where some shoreline repair projects, if they're using sheet piling, they're actually designated as a construction project, which throws them into a whole different category. Where others, if they come in and they use riprap, it's simply a repair, and which makes O&M dollars available. Is there anybody looking at now? And I also understand that the the sheet piling is actually cheaper and takes up less space environmentally than the riprap does. Is anybody looking at reclassifying the use of these sheet pilings so that we could take that out of O&M instead of construction dollars?
So I'll take this. Thank you for your question, and thank you for the support that we receive at Blunt Island Command. I personally walked that shoreline that you talked about. I'm very familiar with the project that you highlight there. We have ran this now through multiple legal teams to ensure, because I like you believe that this should be an O&M expense vice a MILCON appropriation, and that we could work on the sustainment of that seawall. Unfortunately, our hands are constrained from a legal standpoint on how that is classified. We've tried to attempt to push different language in there, but thus far we have not had any. I can take this one for the record, and like my partner here, Ricky, I could come and talk to you. I know that we're timed out here, so I can come and give you some personal brief on that. Sure.
Thank you very much, General. And I yield back, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Rutherford. The gentleman yields back. Mr. Christ, you are recognized for your 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A common theme in the testimonies of most of the witnesses is the existential threat of climate change and what it poses to our installations as well as our readiness. In 2019, the Department of Defense completed its report on the threat posed by climate change to installations. The report found that 18 Navy installations are at risk, 16 of which are at risk of recurrent flooding. This did not take into account overseas installations, so that number is likely to be higher. Mr. Schaefer, 2 years out from that report, can you provide an update on the risk posed by recurrent sea level rise and flooding? And can you also provide any updates to your findings since that report?
Representative Chris, thank you so much for the question. Yes, climate change and issues that you've raised are very important and in the forefront of our mind here at the ASN EI&E. We're working with both of the services to figure out exactly what we need to do with these 16 naval installations that are at risk. I had the opportunity to visit the Naval Academy a few weeks ago with the Acting Assistant Secretary of the Navy, and we looked at the sea level rise issues that Academy will be facing over the next 80 years. And part of what we're looking at are doing individual studies, because each of these areas are unique, to look at what we need to do to make the installation more resilient. And not only are we just looking at our installation, we're working with the city, county, and state authorities to ensure that we're doing these things in concert, because we know we can't take actions alone on an installation, as they may impact the local community. And we are good community partners where our installations are. And I'll certainly allow Vice Admiral Williamson or Lieutenant General Schiroti to add anything specific they'd like to from the Navy or Marine Corps perspective, sir.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yes, sir. Thank you. This is Vice Admiral Williamson. Thank you very much for your question, sir. Specifically to the bases that you mentioned. Obviously, being near the water, most of our bases, we take that the flooding very seriously. How we get after that, to elaborate a little bit on what Mr. Schaefer was saying. Our Navy Climate Change Adaptation and Resiliency Handbook, which is part of our base installation plans, incorporates various studies, both from industry, local academia, for sea level rise to those specific areas. In addition to that, that information is then incorporated into our unified facility criteria, and that is the standards by which each one of those buildings, the new buildings, when we build back better, have to adhere to. In addition to that, NDAA language, we are completely compliant with the NDAA 19 language that says that for all mission critical facilities that we build back 3 feet above the 100-year floodplain. In addition to that, all non-critical buildings must be built at least 2 feet above. So we bring all elements of those together, and then we validate that through our mission assurance surveys when we go out to the base. In addition to that, we also seek opportunities to move or get out or demolish buildings that are in danger of succumbing to that, and also taking a look at the environmental, whether it be the wetlands, refortifying shorelines, and that's all built into our base master plans. Over, sir.
Anything else on that?
Sure, I can take it from the Marine Corps perspective, sir. As we rebuild from the impacts of Hurricane Florence, much like the Navy, all of our facilities have or will exceed a UFC code. We have relocated buildings, headquarters buildings specifically from 100-year high floodplains, and moved them in base towards high ground, which will give us the resiliency that's needed to withstand future tide changes. At Parris Island specifically, we have completed a climate resiliency study, which is informing our investments that we will make in the future to ensure that we can remain mission capable on the depot. And as you know, sir, it's not just about the climate impact, but in San Diego Marine Corps Recruit Depot, we have a seismic activity there, and we have to be in compliance there. And many of those facilities are vulnerable because of the historical nature of the depot. They have to become compliant to the codes that have been established in California and by the federal government to meet seismic activities. So we are moving aggressively to ensure that we are shoring up all of our facilities to meet the impacts of climate and other challenges that the installations face. Sure.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I see my time is up. I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chris. The gentleman yields back. Mr. Gonzalez, you are recognized for your 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, I spent 20 years in the Navy, retired as a Master Chief, and I'd argue quality of life is fundamental to recruitment and retention. And that lane falls solely with the, not solely, but it falls in the senior enlisted leader ranks. So my first question is for Sergeant Major Black. As a father, veteran, and Texan, the murder of Vanessa Guillen hit close to home. My oldest daughter is Vanessa's age when she was murdered. The Fort Hood Independent Review Committee determined that at the time of her murder, the command climate at Fort Hood was permissive of sexual harassment and assault. Fear of another tragedy can affect recruitment and readiness. To their credit, the Army underwent a thorough review and is revising the way it intakes and handles sexual harassment and sexual assault claims. This problem isn't limited to Fort Hood or the Army. How have the Navy and Marine Corps team improved the way they intake and handle sexual harassment claims?
Sir, thank you for your question. Just so I can be clear on sexual assault writ large, it's a crime. Simply put, it's a crime. We should treat it and look at any sexual assault allegation as a crime. Thank you, by the way, to everybody that took part in updating the Uniform Code of Military Justice, which now has a specific violation attached to sexual assault. With reference to Fort Hood, in your specific question, sir, we've read that investigation. There were numerous recommendations that came out of the investigation. I believe it's about 15 of them. And we've taken action on some of them already, and we're proceeding with the rest as we get through some of the administration of that. We're continuing to right size and professionalize the SAPR programs throughout the Marine Corps. I would offer to the entire department, right sizing our SAPR programs is a number one. Do we have the right amount of people in the right place to be able to affect the training, the education, and prevention? And I'll add intervention from my own personal thought on intervention of potential sexual harassment, sexual assault. Increased commander engagement. What I mean by that is not that commanders aren't necessarily engaged, but more emphasis on training commanders on how to develop a command climate that does not even have a perception that sexual assault or sexual harassment is permissible, acceptable, or is ignored within their commands. Additionally, Additional case level review processes, I think, are helpful. And we talked about this a little bit before about investigatory processes. That's after the fact. But the fact of the matter is deterrence comes from also being able to get after those that commit the offense. Anything we can do to speed up the investigatory process will ultimately get faster case resolution. We go down a long list, sir, but I think some of the highlights I'll put to you right there, those things are happening right now. And we're going to continue to work towards achieving the rest of the recommendations of the Fort Hood investigation as quickly as we possibly can. Thank you.
Thank you, Sergeant Major. And I'll just reiterate, this zero tolerance for sexual harassment and sexual assault has to be a priority, right, to all of us. There's some talk of maybe taking some of that authority out of the base commanders and putting it in another function or functionality. Doesn't matter to me. Like, we just have to get to the root of the issue. And I look at the senior enlisted leaders as those that have the pulse of the troops, the pulse of the sailors, soldiers, airmen, and Marines, and we have to ensure that those are protected. My next question is for McPon Smith. I served 20 years in the Navy, right? I'm Mexican American. I represent a district that is 71% Hispanic. When I was in the Navy, what fears me the most is I wake up and I don't recognize my Navy. And I didn't retire 30 years ago. I retired a little over a year ago. And what it feels as if everybody, this woke culture is trying to label everybody. You're a white sailor, you're a black sailor, you're a brown sailor, you're this, that, or the other. When I served my time in the Navy, I was just a U.S. Navy sailor. So my question is this, specifically on Task Force 1, the Navy's Task Force 1 proposal. How much did Task Force 1 Navy's activity cost the American taxpayer?
Sir, I don't have the dollar amount of the cost. I can take that question for the record and get back to you, but I'll tell you the benefit that we gained from that task force effort has been incalculable. Understanding and seeing where we have problems and biases and frankly issues of racism that we need to correct. And make sure that we provide, as the CNO says, opportunity for every sailor who comes to us. That's critical to our warfighting effort. As I said in the beginning, in my opening statement, complex problems in combat are solved best by diverse teams that have diversity of thought that comes with the diversity of who we serve alongside. So it's critical for us to embrace that diversity and ensure not just for the American people and saying, here's an opportunity and you should be able to take advantage of it. But frankly, that's how we win. We're not a homogenous nation like some of our near peer competitors. We have that luxury of the diversity of thought. A sailor from Chicago, as you know, thinks very differently than a sailor who grew up in California or grew up in Texas or grew up in New York. And having diverse teams that not only look and reflect the American people we serve, but have that diversity of thought to work through complex challenges. That's what we need to win.
I got much more on this, but I'm out of time. I yield back, Madam Chair.
Thank you for your line of questioning, Mr. Gonzalez. The gentleman yields back. Mr. Trone, you're recognized for 5 minutes. Before you go, though, I am going to need to turn the gavel over briefly to Mr. Case because I have a markup in another committee and I'm offering an amendment. So, Mr. Case, you can take over the meeting and I will be back momentarily.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This has been a great hearing. Thank you to the witnesses. We appreciate it. Let's return to a point that Judge Carter I brought up that's so important to all of us, and that's, again, suicide prevention. We certainly owe it to our service members to give them great mental health care to help prevent these tragedies. So, Sergeant Major Black, in your testimony, you talked about the Human Performance Branch and the Marine Family Programs are working to study, close the gaps, and behavioral health resources and services. So what are the gaps you've identified so far, and what resources? How can we help you? You need to address them.
Sir, thank you for the question. Honestly, because this has been a project that the Commandant has asked me to look at since the day that I got in this seat, just almost 2 years ago. Let me use an example very, very quickly. Hopefully it proves the point. I don't want to compare humans to equipment, but just as an example. If we buy a program of record, let's say it's an aircraft, we buy that thing for 30 years and we do everything we can in one program to ensure it's updated, the right fuels in it, right missile systems, we update the data systems, we wash it, we clean it, we do all those things. It's non-negotiable. I would say how we look at human capital, we don't necessarily buy, again, I apologize for using the terms, but they're relevant. We don't buy the human for 30 years. We enlist someone and then we train and educate, and those are all fantastic programs, and we have the right things going on to win battles. But what we don't do a very good job is coordinating all the elements, and this is really the point of the CNA study, sir, is all the things that we have directed towards human performance don't necessarily focus on an individual. There are services that are provided. Those programs have great lines of funding to them. Thank you to anyone that's ever involved in that. But we have a structural challenge inside our institution of how we coordinate those efforts to get them to where it needs to be. And that's to the individual Marine and sailor and their families. One example, however, our human performance branch did, and I don't want to talk budget, sir, but it's relevant. We did have a line last year for $8 million on human performance innovation and programs. It was marked by half, went to 4. So that $4 million could have done things like get the right athletic trainers to the right locations where we can do preventative injuries, where we can do nutrition, where we can put our chaplains to work on spiritual health, where we can put our mental health providers in order to put the care where it needs to be at, upgrade facilities and resources. All those things are a combined program. It really falls into the chairman's total force fitness program. We're just calling it human performance in the Marine Corps. Other services call it other things. But that human capital that we have right now is the most important thing for us to be able to compete against our adversaries. Always has been, and needs to be even more focused now that we have an adversary at that level that we need to compete with.
That's great. Well, please feel free to reach out and talk with Chairwoman and Judge Carter about resources as we go forward. We're here to help you, and this is a problem, as the judge mentioned, that just has never gone away. The suicide rate is, just mind-boggling. And we've got to pull the team together to help our sailors and Marines. Sergeant Major Black, Representative Gonzalez, and also Ed Case have both talked about this already, and that's the mental health and sexual assault. Could you directly hit upon what you're providing right now, mental health to the survivors of sexual assault and mental health supports?
So we have numerous programs, and I wouldn't try to list all of them, but I can tell you that there are a good number of programs, and I'll tell you why we focus on those programs specific to mental health. Our system is a victim-focused system. So when we have someone who has experienced sexual harassment or sexual assault, they immediately are provided services based upon their needs and what they request. Our mental health providers have several focus areas. Obviously, any mental health condition is a focus, but how do you prioritize them? Suicide is aftercare for potential sexual assault or sexual harassment, or ones that have been validated. It doesn't matter. Anyone that's in need is going to receive that care. I would say there have been challenges. One of those challenges, we've had discussions about the impacts of COVID, or we will. There was a period of time at the beginning of the pandemic, however, when those providers, mental health care providers, were isolated from their populations of those they've been counseling. The telework is a thing we're doing really well right now. We weren't doing it so well in April, May, June, July of last year with all the restriction in COVID and managing the pandemic. One of the gaps I would take a look at, or we're looking at, I should say, is how we in the future mitigate and be able to maintain consistency in our programs and our mental health care, no matter what the case. But specific to SAPR, sir, those cases are as high a priority as any that we have.
Well, certainly we've seen out of COVID, one of the few positives is the success of mental health. So we would certainly encourage you. The data there is overwhelmingly positive on rates of show up for the mental health event versus call outs where folks just didn't take the time. So that's been a real win, and the service can utilize that. That'd be good. Last quickly question, Masters Chief Smith, affordable child care was mentioned as #1 issue. How did COVID affect the DoD child care facilities in terms of lost revenue and additional expenses, and what help do you need there?
Sir, any assistance that that this committee can provide is most welcome when it comes to child care. Frankly, the impact of COVID has been significant on all of us. I think the nation as a whole. You know, child care workers that work in that field, they have kids of their own. They have challenges when they have to isolate or they have to come offline. You know, if a child tests positive at a facility, they've got to stop what they're doing, close the facility. It affects everybody that gets care there. They have to go through and clean and sanitize and then reopen up. So there are delays that then have a ripple impact on everybody that uses that child care facility. So the impact of COVID cannot be overstated. You know, parents who have their kids in school typically, but couldn't because schools were closed for the longest time, and therefore had to come up with alternative means for childcare when CDCs were already overwhelmed. That had a tremendous impact on our workforce across our Navy. So honestly, I wouldn't want to place any constraints on what the CNO would choose to prioritize, but MILCON and building out more space would certainly be helpful in conjunction with our public-private venture efforts, or anything we can do to increase capacity, because the need's not getting smaller, sir, it's getting bigger.
Okay, thank you for that. I yield back.
Thank you. The gentleman yields back. We'll begin now with our second round of questions. Mr. Case, after I ask my questions, I'll be turning the gavel over to you. My next set of questions focuses on women in the Marines. The Marine Corps has consistently lagged the other military branches in integrating women and was only 8.6% female in 2018, about half the figure of 16.5% when considering the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines as a whole, according to a GAO office report in 2020. When former Defense Secretary Ashton Carter ordered all combat roles open to women in December of 2015, if you recall, the Marine Corps was alone among the services in requesting exceptions in areas like infantry, machine gunner, fire support, and reconnaissance, according to a Congressional Research Service report, and those exceptions were denied. It's good to see that progress has been made. Last month, 53 women in the first ever co-ed company to train at the Marine Corps' West Coast Training Base at Camp Pendleton completed the Crucible on April 22nd. Sergeant Major Black and General Girodi, the Marine Corps has historically fallen behind the other branches in recruiting and training women. What is the Marine Corps doing to ensure more women can serve and that installations are equipped for all genders? Clearly, if we have more women, sexual assault and sexual harassment become less of a problem, particularly as those women begin to move up the ranks.
Madam Chairwoman, I'll offer some first comments. First, every single MOS in the Marine Corps, as you know, ma'am, is open for men and women. That's a plus. And I gotta tell you, being an infantryman myself, it doesn't matter what you look like. If you can do the job, that's what's important. I think it's also helpful at this point to note that I'm married to a Marine, so I get both sides of the experience, right? My wife's a retired Marine, and to say I live it every day would be the right answer. And I don't mean that in a negative context. I actually have context in this discussion. So opening up all the MOSs with reluctance, I think we're past that now. But all MOSs are open, and more women are beginning to join the Marine Corps and serve in those previously open MOSs. I'm happy to report the first Marine reconnaissance female graduated not so long ago as well. One of our toughest entry-level pipeline courses to recruit into, one, but to successfully complete. A woman's achieved that, man. As far as how we're working to get more of our diversity of females in the Marine Corps, we have a very forward-facing female advertising campaign right now. I think hopefully some of us have noticed in some of the commercials that we've seen, there's a lot of more forward presence of strong, capable leaders that are women that are in our programs. Our advertising is directed towards that. We've seen some of the numbers not yet tick as high as we would like to, but it's a focus of our Marine Corps Recruiting Command's efforts right now is to go after a larger population of women to join. Retention is also one of the areas that I think is important to the overall strength of the Marine Corps and our diversity. At varying levels and times in careers, we do have women that are retained at higher levels than our men. That will hopefully continue to build out a larger depth of women in our Corps, man.
Thank you.
Ma'am, I will, if I can, just jump in. There's not much that I can say on top of Sergeant Major Black's eloquent explanation there, but I'll tell you this from a personal perspective. I'm a father of 3. My youngest daughter is a second lieutenant of Marines. She is about ready to go through the basic school where she will be assigned a military occupational specialty.
General, I'm sorry. Can I just interrupt you for a moment? Because I really am, the question is designed
Please.
to generate specifics. I'd like to know, and it's good that you're putting more women in a forward-facing position in your advertisements, but what specifically is the Marine Corps doing to ensure that more women can serve, that they are likely to serve, that they feel welcome and encouraged, and that installations are equipped for all genders?
Ma'am, I think the first is leading by example, and so we have our first company that you saw on the news, and a very successful graduation of an integrated company of Marines that last week. I think that more than anything else is the message to the nation that the Marine Corps welcomes individuals who are able to achieve the title of United States Marine. From an installations perspective, we are looking we are studying the requirements to modify facilities, specifically at San Diego and Parris Island. As we talked the other day, ma'am, we already know what the price for that is. Roughly about $198 million that we will put into a future requirement here to modify the existing facilities to accommodate for the gender integrated companies.
Okay. Mr. Secretary, do you have anything to add?
Ma'am, as my Marine counterparts have said, this is important to the Department of the Navy. We've got leadership attention on it and working with our uniform members to ensure that we're allowing females to compete for all MOSs. And as Sergeant to Major said, it's not about what you look like, it's about how you perform. And we're working to make sure that we're opening up all those areas to females.
Great. So for the record, if you could get me more specifics about what you are proactively doing to make sure that you are leaning into recruiting women and making sure that that your facilities are equipped for women, I would appreciate that.
Yes, ma'am. We'll take that for the record and get back to you and your staff.
Thank you very much. Okay, my time has expired, and I turn the gavel over to Mr. Case until I return.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Judge Carter, recognized for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, Ed. You know, I've been sitting here thinking about this with the sexual assault cases. Over the 20 years that I was served as a district judge, which are felony level judges in Texas, tried a sexual assault case at least one every grand jury term, and we rotated grand jury terms between 2 and then later 3 judges. Every one for my entire career. Sometimes 2 or 3. So it's not just the military that's got a problem. Our society's got a problem with it. But does the investigatory part that the Sergeant Major talked about really strikes a tone with me? Because I know that the victims are very, very upset when they don't feel like somebody's working on their case. We experience that at the civilian level too. Does NCSI have a special victims unit? If not, could we create one? Whoever wants to respond, I'll be glad to hear your comment.
Sir, Sergeant Major Black here. We'll take that question specifically and see how each NCIS detachment is actually working, but they are the only organization that has investigatory authority to go after and try to find resolution to these cases. And as we well know, that community also has other things that they do. There are other investigatory properties that we have inside the services that could probably take on some of that caseload, and that would give the ability to speed up some of this casework, sir.
Anybody else?
To that point, Ms. Master Chief Smith, sir, to that point, NCIS was given that charter, but they weren't necessarily funded with the resources to meet that requirement. And that's why it takes so long to investigate a lot of these things, because they have to be thorough. And that takes time when you have a limited amount of folks that can do this work.
Well, that might be something we could do something about. So let's look at, I'm going to look into that, because I've experienced personally the victims' complaints about how long it took to happen at the civilian side, and it's painful. It really is. And I'll get on that. Thank you for the information. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Ranking Member. Ms. Pingree, would you like to proceed with questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for kindly letting me enter. And thank you to our witnesses. I apologize, I've been in another committee, so I haven't had an opportunity to hear the questions that you've been answering or to hear your thoughts today, but I do want you to know I appreciate your service and come from a proud Navy family. My brother was in the Navy, so it's great to be with you here today. I just want to ask a question about the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard in Kittery, Maine, that is, and that's in my district. There's been a lack of priority, I think, in this area and adequate funding. And it's important that the modernization continues. There has been work done in recent years, and the yard itself does incredible work with the resources that have been available to them. But we could do so much more with upgraded facilities. So my question is about the Shipyard Infrastructure Optimization Plan. The major component of that is the improvement and upgrade of the dry docks at the 4 public shipyards, a $4.5 billion investment. The subcommittee has already invested in this effort at PNSY by funding 2 projects in FY19 and funded the first installment of a major multi-mission Dry Dock 1 modernization project in FY21. The multi-mission dry dock modernization project will allow for simultaneous docking and overhauls of Virginia-class submarines and eliminate the need and expense to float submarines to get them into the dock. We are hoping the second and third funding increments for this project will be coming in 22 and 23. So can you speak to what the consequences would be if there is a failure to continue funding this project on time, both in terms of the backlog and availabilities across public shipyards, as well as the operational needs of the fleet to have the boats on deployment rather than sitting idle at dockside?
Ma'am, Mr. Todd Schaefer here from ASN EI&E. Clearly, you fully understand the importance of keeping the SIOP program in place. We have world-class Navy, and we need to keep that Navy maintained at a world-class level. And our shipyards have not been modernized in many years, and that's why we're undertaking this program over 20 years to modernize those. And it is very important that we keep it on track. We have to balance that with our ability to continue to do maintenance so that there's sort of a sweet spot in there between how much we can execute and how much we can continue to do maintenance. So it is very important because if we're not able to balance that, we won't be able to do the maintenance we need to keep number of ships available as we do our man training and equip mission for the combatant commanders. And I'd like to offer Vice Admiral Williamson an opportunity to give a more specific Navy answer to that, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much for the question, and thank you for the support of the shipyard. As the CNO has testified and made very clear, our public shipyards are vital to our national defense. Obviously, this, it's where the lion's share of work is done with our CBNs and our subs. And you know better than I do, the facilities are 61 years old and our dry docks are 107 years old. The pacing of the work in the SIOP program is very critical. to ensure our mission readiness. We're very appreciative of the plus up that you gave us of $96 million. $40 million of that's already been spent in designing Dry Dock 3, Project 209 at Kittery. And we expect, the rest of that funding to keep moving forward. In addition to that, we expect the remaining of the money to be executed by 23. But very specifically, as we move forward, we have laid out a very in-depth plan in the SIOP. Phase 1 being obviously the assessment of the dry docks themselves and the stand-up of a SIOP program. Both of those are complete. We're in phase 2 now, where we are making digital twins of each one of the shipyards in ADP. Pearl has been completed, and we expect the others to be completed by the end of 2020. And then that will allow us to move on with an effective plan to ensure that we're on plan, both in concert with maintenance of fleet assets and the best opportunity for us to get through and obviously revitalize this very important national asset.
Well, thank you for your answer, and I know I'm about to run out of time, but I just want to add, I really appreciate your commitment and your demonstration of understanding how critically important it is to keep with the funding program at this shipyard. It is a historic shipyard, and it's got some amazing historic buildings there, but it also needs to be modernized given the importance of taking good care of our fleet. And just briefly, I was fortunate enough to pay a visit there with the rest of our delegation from Maine, as well as the New Hampshire delegation, and it was just phenomenally impressive to see the work that was going down there. We got a little bit of a sense of what's going on with the digital project, and also some amazing innovations that were brought about by workers at the shipyard suggesting good ideas. And I think our eyes were bugging out with just the incredible stuff that they were moving forward. So kudos to the Navy and to that particular shipyard for the work they're doing. And I apologize for going over, but since I was complimenting everybody, I'm sure it's allowed. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Compliments are welcomed. Mr. Valadeo, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Case. This question is directed towards Lieutenant General Charati. The Marine Corps Air Combat Center in 29 Palms has been experiencing this problem that I'll get into. And several bases and their surrounding communities in California are experiencing a severe shortage of long-term rental housing options. Uncontrolled increases in short-term vacation rentals are driving up the market in rural scenic areas and limiting long-term rental opportunities for our service members and their families. Compounded with the rising cost of home building, the lack of available land to build on, some service members have to move their families an hour away from the base to find affordable housing. How is the Marine Corps adjusting to these significant housing market changes? And outside of building more base housing, are there any other solutions that could ensure our service members are competitive in the housing market?
Sir, thank you very much for your question and the concern that you raise for our Marines and sailors and their families at 29 Palms. Over the past year, we have through the support of the Department of Defense and the Hill, been able to raise the basic allowance for housing for the 29 Palms area, which gives our Marines and their families the competitive edge that's needed in a market that, as you say, is hyper competitive for the vacation rental piece. And it has expanded, if you will, the zip code in which they can travel to look for affordable quality homes, not just in the 29 Palms area. Additionally, we're working with our private partners in the housing portfolio to see if we have the right balance percentage-wise of homes available for on-base housing. We believe that they provide at 29 Palms a quality product, and we wanted to be able to explore that with more opportunities that they may be able to bring online.
All right, no, I appreciate that. And then this one is directed towards Master Chief Smith and then Sergeant Major Black. I'm very interested in the Navy and Marine Corps doing department-wide to provide on-base activities and programs for our younger service members. Many bases like NAS Lemoore are located in rural communities and that don't have a lot to do off of base. Thankfully, NAS Lemoore has recently finished a recreation activity facility that has been very well received by those living on base. Does the Navy and the Marine Corps have plans to build and modernize any more recreational facilities and activity centers? And I mean, every area is a little bit different. Obviously, Lemoore, people have to commute a little bit further, but a lot of these guys are working with very little pocket money, and having those opportunities, I think, is obviously a huge quality of life concern for them. So, are there any plans there?
Sir, it's Meshi Smith. In the interest of time, I'll just say that we keep a very close eye on Lemoore. You know, we call it the donut. You can't do anything really there, but you're about 2 to 3 hours away from amazing things in any direction, from the mountains to the sea and everything in between. So we do continue to invest. It's a very family-friendly place, but as you point out, as a single sailor, you really have to go a ways to find healthy, good, smart, fun activities to do. So we're continuing to invest in those programs there. It's one of the hardest locations to get junior sailors to go to for us, and because of that specific issue. So we do invest in a lot of places, but we pay very close attention to Lemoore.
All right. And obviously, it's a big quality of life issue. So, and it does affect these guys. This committee has been especially interested in the steps the service branches are taking to manage and address PFAS. And this one is to Mr. Schaefer and Vice Admiral Williamson. In March, we heard testimony from DoD officials on the steps being taken military-wide to address these concerns. Do you feel that you have adequate resources to effectively address PFAS contaminations on bases?
Representative, thank you so much for your question and concern about PFAS. We in the Department of the Navy are most certainly using the resources that have been provided by the Congress to fight PFAS and to study PFAS and then look for alternatives to our current use of PFAS in our firefighting foam, which is the primary use that we have currently for PFAS. I do want to make sure you know that anytime that there's an issue about PFAS, that the first thing we do is make sure that we're going out and we're doing the appropriate sampling and other things of drinking water and other agents that could be in the environment to ensure that there's no risk to the public. And right now we have no communities that the Navy has been responsible for contaminating that are drinking contaminated water. So this is clearly a leadership issue for the Department of the Navy, and we are working hard to get after that. And we continue to do our research and development on substitute for PFAS. So not easy. We've got some of the world's best folks working on this at our Naval Research Lab, and we continue to do that development. So, of course, continued resourcing of this program is.
All right, I think cut out. So my time is up. I yield back. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Valdeo, did you get the end of your response?
I think it's a technical issue there. But no, I did not, and hopefully we get that on the record at some point. And we'll
okay, do you want him to repeat anything you didn't hear?
I think wherever he left off there at the very end.
Okay, if you could, I'm not sure who was speaking, but whoever was
responding. It was Mr. Schaefer.
Mr. Schaefer, Secretary Schaefer, if you could finish the end of your response, please. Mr. Valadeo didn't hear you. He may be having technical difficulties he's been having throughout the meeting. Okay, sorry, thanks. We'll get it for the record. The gentleman yields back. Mr. Case, you are recognized for your 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Schaefer, if you can hear me, and Admiral Williamson, first of all, I want to, Ms. Pingree and I are members on this committee of the Shipyard Coalition in Congress. I represent, of course, Pearl Harbor Naval Shipyard, and I want to endorse her strong endorsement of SIOP That's critical to our country. Frankly, we've had some concerns that it's been lagging a little bit, and certainly we've been discussing that with you, but are very concerned that that does in fact stay very much on track. Let me ask, looks like Mr. Schaefer is not on, so this, Admiral Williamson, if you can answer this, but there was reference made in Mr. Schaefer's testimony to the Navy's partnering with the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard to improve energy reliability, essentially cost savings at Portsmouth to try to improve energy reliability in a variety of ways. And I'm interested in that. And the question is whether that same effort is going to be applied to the other 3 shipyards as well, if you know. I may have lost Mr. Admiral Williamson as well. I'm seeing Mr. Schaefer. Can you hear me?
Hi, Representative Case. Yes, sorry, I dropped offline. I'm back on now, so I apologize.
Okay, question is energy savings at Portsmouth Naval Shipyard effort. Are you expanding that to the other 3 shipyards as well?
Sir, yes, as you know, Congress has granted us authorities in energy and to be able to partner with private industry to make sure that we can become more resilient in the energy category. And we are investigating all areas to make sure our shipyards are resilient. You know, of course, we've got some goals of trying to get to a net zero position across the Department of Defense, which would be wonderful. We had our first example of that with at Albany, and we're working through that. We are looking at the shipyards to make sure, one, that they're redundant and that they're resilient, and we're looking at all avenues and all the authorities that the Congress has granted us to do those kind of activities, sir.
What's your timing on going to the other 3 shipyards with the same analysis you did with Portsmouth?
Sir, if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to take that for the record to ensure that I give you specific answers on each one of those shipyards. I don't recall that off the top of my head. So if you wouldn't mind, I'll take that for the record and get back to you and your staff with the proper answer.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
On a broader level, you testified in your written testimony, at least, that and a little bit in your spoken testimony on your resiliency component in terms of your installation master planning. And I was interested in that. What can you just lay that out a little bit more? Exactly, what are you factoring in there, and what do you mean by a resiliency component? I assume what you mean is both a planning component, but also some kind of a cost margin to account for resiliency necessities in new construction, but also does that include resiliency reinforcement on the existing infrastructure?
Yes, sir. I can give you a prime example. I happened to go down and visit Parris Island a few weeks ago. And actually, the acting Assistant Secretary of the Navy gave them an award for the work that they're doing in climate resiliency and energy resiliency. And we're really starting to take a war planning-like effort towards climate resiliency. The Parris Island folks have done that. So we're looking at all avenues to do the resiliency that we need. So part of it starts with, first we have to understand what we need to be resilient for. And once we get that into the master plan, then we have to start to talk about how do we do a cost estimate on that and lay that into our planning and programming system. So the good news in my mind, sir, is that we're getting after this now, and that we're gonna have to take advantage of the time horizon we have before some of these climate change events may take place, and that'll allow us to make the smart investments at the right time over time to ensure the resiliency of our installations going forward.
Okay, thank you very much. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Case, and thank you for taking over while I was gone. Mr. Rutherford, you're recognized for your 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll take just a minute. I really just want to follow up on the conversation I was having with General Chiroti and ask Assistant Secretary Schaefer You know, we mentioned that at the Blunt Island Command, the environmental problem that we're having there with the island and the need to fix this shoreline. And it really is a very important project for Blunt Island. And again, it goes back to construction dollars versus repair and maintenance, and how this environmental challenge is not a maintenance, but a construction requirement. Mr. Schaefer, the language in there, is it possible to change it at your level so that this could actually come through as a repair process versus a construction project?
Thank you, sir, for allowing me to follow up with you on this issue. Certainly, this is a concern for us as well. My understanding is that it is tied up in statutory issues. So we've got a group that is looking at that. It's also tied up in policy inside of DoD and the Department of the Navy. So we're looking for the appropriate ways to make changes to possibly allow us to do that, or come up with alternatives. And it could lead to a legislative proposal to make changes. But we certainly are following the letter of the law and doing the things that we have to do by statutory regulation. And if there is a policy that we can modify inside of the Department of the Navy, we will certainly look at that and work with our services to make sure that we're making the best use of the dollars that are provided to the Department of the Navy.
And I thank you for that, Mr. Schaefer. And what I would ask is, look, we write the laws. So if there's a way that a simple law change can help with this project, and look, I'm sure this is not the only project that the Navy is dealing with. You have shoreline all over that you're dealing with, I'm sure. So I just want to offer to you, if you need a legal answer to this, a tweak of the law, then this is certainly a committee that would be interested in helping with that. That's exactly what we're here for. So if the language in the law is the problem between construction and repair, we would love to help you with that. So can you comment on that?
Yes, sir. And sir, I don't know all the specifics on that, but certainly we would come back to you and your committee for some assistance on that. And sir, if you'd like a more detailed answer, I can take that for the record and get back to you and your staff, so you and your staff can understand where the complications are for us.
Sure, and I would love for that, Mr. Schaefer, and then maybe we can help you out. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
Madam Chair, I yield back.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rutherford, and we look forward to following up on your line of questioning and how we can be helpful. That concludes this morning's hearing. Seeing no other members that are still with us seeking recognition for a second round of questions, I want to thank our witnesses for participating in today's hearing. Your updates and perspectives will be very valuable to us as we develop the FY22 appropriations bill. Secretary Schaefer, I would urge you to take our admonitions back to the White House, particularly as it relates to requesting funds for more child development centers. That is clearly absolutely crucial. It helps us tremendously when those requests are in the president's budget, and also to make sure that the infrastructure for the Marine Corps particularly is requested for upgrades that are necessary to accommodate recruitment of women. There are a lot of other issues to cover, so we look forward to getting your responses for the record. And I want to remind members that our next virtual hearing is next Tuesday, May 18th, 2021, and that hearing will be the Air Force Quality of Life and Installations Update. With that, this hearing is adjourned.